You have 3 seconds to get a renter's attention online, but are your words compelling enough to get their attention and then get them to take action? That's what we're going to talk about today. So, hi, we're Market Apartments. I'm Danny. I'm the social media strategist here. And this
Uh,
is Chandra.
Yep, I'm the content writer.
Hi. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about content and copy because your message matters and your words and the appeal and the flow and like the purpose behind them, that all really matters based on like what you're trying to do.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and as a property manager or an owner, anyone who's trying to actually market their property, market any type of like apartment building or multifamily residence, it can be tricky because there are so many places you're trying to like advertise. And honestly, that's a lot of content. There's a lot of writing that actually goes into that. And I think sometimes you don't realize until you get going that there are so many different places that you have to do that. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between content and copy, and also these different strategies, and just all the different places you really have to write in order to advertise your property. Yeah.
Yes, and there's a lot that goes into it, like more than you would think too, but like anywhere your words show up online, like that's either copy or content. So you want to make
Mhm.
sure that it's geared towards your audience and then it's saying what it needs to say. It's getting their attention and it's getting them to take the next action. So
Right,
we're gonna add a
right.
few tips on that as
For
well.
sure. Yeah. Because I'm sure a lot of you know about content because we talk about generating content all the time with social media,
Hmm.
things like that. Not everyone may be familiar with the term copy or copywriting. But if you've done a little marketing, you probably are. So we're going to talk a little bit about the differences there. But yeah, I think just keeping in mind really who your audience is and your goals when you're trying to reach them, depending on where it's at, is what's going to make the biggest difference. So,
For sure.
um, yeah. Danny, why don't you give us a little bit of explanation, the difference between content and copy?
Sure, yeah. So content is basically like it's for education, it's for like entertainment. So like your blogs or the website content, like when people like when renters come across your website, basically you like have the little introductory paragraph there. And it's like, this is who we are, this is what we do. And then it kind of like leads down to like the next thing. And it just kind of helps your website flow in a way that like explains to the renter what they're gonna get, what they can expect to see on the website and things like that. So yeah, so that's content. And then with copy, you're trying to persuade them to take an action. So like we kind of think of this as like ads. That's like one of the most common forms, and it's one of the things that like pops up the most when people talk about copy because
Hmm.
it's persuasive. You're trying to get someone to click or to like take an action, like make a sale, whatever it is. So, but that's like the main difference there. So, yes, other forms could be like social media captions. If you're like, hey, take a tour, like that's copy.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
Yeah. So any like sales page, a lot of times marketing emails, things like that, anything that you're trying to get them to do something, I think tends to be copy. Uh, so yeah, I mean, the difference really is the intent. It does get tricky in today's age, because a lot of it has it's big crossover, and we'll
oh yeah,
talk a little bit about that. So if that wasn't like totally clear or you've seen a little bit of both, we'll talk about why. But apartments do need both. I mean, you need to be able to utilize both of those strategies, both to like educate and inform because people, this is the first time they might be encountering your property, but also to persuade because you want them to take that next action, whether that's scheduling a tour, or applying, contacting you, whatever it is, you want them to take that next step in the process to getting an apartment with you. Um,
for sure.
I guess I just want to use the examples, Danny.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
So, like, we'll pay your moving expenses when you sign a lease with us. Like, that's copy.
mhm.
Or like guidance for our community garden, that would be content. And that could be
Right.
something that like you send out in a blog or like in an email just to your renters. Or like if you have like a welcome packet, it might be like, this is or community
Mhm.
garden, and it like goes through like,
Right,
these are the
right.
tips, these are the rules, or whatever
Right.
it is.
Well, even a infographic or something like
Yeah,
a social media post, a
yeah,
carousel post with the different little tips. A lot of content like that it's very versatile. You can use it in a lot of different places.
for sure.
It's just important to remember the goal and who you're trying to reach with it and
Exactly.
what you want them to do next. Like, what's the point of what you're writing and sharing?
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, they do overlap a lot.
Hmm.
And I mean, I think even I've been really confused by this a lot of times because I write website content most days and website content is not ever just content.
Right.
Um, and so it does get kind of tricky because we'll have some really informative content, like maybe I'm describing the floor plans, or I've written a little blurb about the neighborhood, or even that on the that homepage, but everything has a goal. I mean, even an about page on a website is still, it's informative. So it reads like content, but you're always trying to get someone to do something by the end of it. And so a lot of those have a pretty specific structure. And a lot of times there is a very clear like call to action at the end. There
Yeah,
is that clear next step.
for sure.
So um that's why it's so important, especially for something like apartments, that you get writers, if you can, who really know what they're doing so that they can kind of weave those two things together.
Oh, for sure.
You know, you don't want it to be too salesy because all you're getting is a bunch of copy and not enough like information. But if all you're doing is information, you don't have some sort of CTA, your prospects aren't going to know what to do next or the best way to reach you, or, you know, what is expected of them. So it does get kind of tricky.
Yes, for sure.
Mhm.
Another thing, like when you were talking about weaving it all together too, is like you don't want to be too salesy. You don't
Mhm.
want to be like, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it's just like all just that. You want to connect with your renter as well. So you need to give
Right,
them information in between that, or like reasons that they might want to take the next step,
right.
and make it fun
Exactly.
too. Like,
Mhm. Yeah. No, we were talking earlier just between we were just talking about the no sell sale basically, that like you want to inform somebody and be like, these are all the great benefits of this thing kind of deal. And you're saying it, maybe it's an informative article even, but you're saying, oh, this is what this is. And a lot of times even just explaining things to people can be enough. If you just
oh yeah,
highlight all the great things, which it is copy to highlight a lot of benefits, you know, and
for sure.
features. But even if you just do that, you're just informing them about something. Sometimes that can be enough to make the sale. It can be
Yes.
enough to have them take that next step simply because that in and of itself is so appealing. So, I mean, it's really important to realize you don't have to sit and be super salesy. It's not
Okay,
about,
yeah.
you know, you're not trying to manipulate anyone. You're being persuasive, but it's because you're like, hey, we have this thing that you actually need, and we're trying to
Hmm.
help you see why you need it. So, I mean, that is copy, but it does crop up a lot in content. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure you see that all the time in like social media stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And actually that reminded me of the really famous ad that David Ogilvy wrote. I
Hmm.
don't remember which car it was even about, but I think the headline was something like, at 65 miles an hour, the loudest thing is the clock. And that's the
Oh,
hook.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
then he just went through and he listed just a whole bunch of benefits, and that's all the ad was he
Hmm.
just listed the features and why that feature was important and what it would do
Hmm.
for the driver's life. And that's all it was, but that's all it needed to be. And it sold like
Hmm.
crazy. But it's because
Hmm.
it was going through all of the things that were really helpful. So,
Right. Well, I think had a really clear idea of the audience who's
yes.
like, oh, like that's, I mean, that's sports. You can drive fast.
Mhm.
You know, it was a good car. But saying that the loudest thing is the clock, doesn't that just sound like, I don't know, there's something really sleek about that. He really knew, I think, who he was marketing to, and then just highlighted the benefits. And that often is enough. It
Mhm.
often is.
Especially with renters, they have a list of all the things that they want in an apartment. And so like putting that all together, being like, look, you want something that's in a good location. You want the price to be right. You want like 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, or 2 bedroom,
Mhm.
1 bath, like whatever it
Right.
is. But like making sure that they know all of the information, and they can get it quickly on the website too. And then they know where to look for that stuff. That's really
Mhm.
helpful.
Absolutely.
getting into UX there, but
Well, and also just like SEO stuff. I mean, those are the kinds of things
Mhm,
that I end up having a hand in a lot is
mhm,
the UX and the search engine optimization and things like that on the website. Because when you are writing content and copy, that's where those things come up. Like you're
yeah,
part of that process. So, um, yeah, I think that it's an important thing to keep in mind. I think as you go about it, that just highlighting those things is often the best way to do it. I mean, especially if, like you said, a renter often has a quick list that they want to check off. If you're pet friendly, if you're whatever it is
yeah,
that they're looking for, then you automatically rise to the top of their list and they're going to be more likely to schedule a tour or even apply
oh,
and
yeah,
sign a lease immediately. So I think that's something important to remember. Um, I think something else that's really good to remember with kind of both approaches is how important like storytelling can be.
yes,
There are often a lot of different strategies you can use to persuade people. You can study psychology, whatever, but one thing that people always respond to is a story.
mhm,
And so it may not work in every single instance, but it's something that is very, very effective, which I mean, I think leads to why stuff like social proof. So say like a good review is also effective because usually those people are telling stories about having
yep,
lived there. People remember it, they respond to it. There's this emotional connection there. So the kinds of words you choose that can evoke that emotion, the kinds of things that evoke imagery, that tell a little bit of a story, maybe instead of just on your website, you've got, well, we have this, this, and this. Maybe you paint a picture for them, like, about waking up in the morning to have a coffee on their balcony,
mm,
um,
mhm,
or, spending evenings by the fire pit or on the
yeah,
rooftop terrace or something and having nights out with friends. And I mean, it just paints a very different picture than just saying, oh, we have this, this, and this. You
yes,
can,
yeah,
like
yeah,
we said, sometimes just listing the thing is enough. Um, but if you can help people get a real idea of what that would be like by crafting a story or
mhm,
having, current residents essentially tell a story through their reviews, all of that is really, really helpful.
for sure, yes,
I will say with website content, you do want to make sure that there are certain pages you'd want to include. Again, all of the website content, every page basically does have copy on it. That's just the reality. But you want to make sure that there's you'll have a home page that has kind of an overview that hits a lot of those highlights about the property. Often there's like a gallery page, amenities page, floor plan page. And the floor plan page is actually one of the top pages that anyone looks at on a website. So you'd really want to make sure that your content and copy are really good on that one. And then also like blogging, it's optional. You don't have to do it. It's not like a big deal, but I would recommend it. It gives you a chance to use more keywords, reach more people. Um, and an apartment website isn't going to have hundreds and hundreds of pages. So, you want to make sure that the content that you have on there is really effective.
for
So
sure,
that means it reaches the right people. You've got, um, maybe some like clever hooks, you've got good storytelling, you've got all the information you need, and then also that it hits all those points with, good UX, it's structured well, it's optimized for search engines, so you've got the right kind of keywords. Um, just to throw out a list, meta tags, headers, things like that. And we'll dive a little bit more into that in a future video, but just something to keep in mind that if you're talking about your website, which is kind of your home, basically online, you'll want to make sure you have all those things and that the content and copy are solid because
oh,
that's
yeah,
your first impression basically with people.
yes, for sure. Okay, so where else do we use copy and content? Basically everywhere. So like listing websites, social media, in your ads. If you do any like collaborations with other like websites or trying to think like if you do like local events or anything like that, you show up there, that's copy and content too. So
Mhm.
basically you do want to make sure that it's like it says what it needs to say and that like it brings people through not knowing you exist to knowing you exist.
So basically like everywhere that you show up, that there are words, there is content and
Yeah.
copy. Which does mean that it gets a little a little complicated and it can be a lot, you know, if you're not the best writer, but you're trying to market, or you don't know the right strategies to like persuade or how to write a good hook. It can be really tricky because even, you know, like you've mentioned before, like even replying to reviews, is content and copy. You want to represent yourself well, and you want to always remember who your audience is and who you're trying to reach. So there's a lot to keep in mind as you write those things. But it's definitely doable to do it well. Like, I think that, you know, I don't want to like overwhelm anyone in the sense that like, well, content and copy are any of the writing you have to do for your property is a lot and it's really important. So, you know, um, it is, but it's also not as difficult as it seems. Which is why we want to do this like little kind of mini series basically on, writing basically for the internet. So content and copywriting. So we will have another video out on copy. We're going to have another one out on content specifically. But it's something you use literally everywhere. And like I said before, it's the first place that people kind of get a feel for your brand, for the property. It's first impression time. So,
sure.
that's why it is so important.
Exactly. So just like a really brief word on AI because it's super popular right now and it's like we're hearing like about it in so many different places and there's so many different platforms that are coming out too for AI too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
like
just
not just
writing alone.
right,
Even.
yeah,
It's not
exactly.
just writing, but like there are a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So we're just gonna put in a little note here about that with copy and content because it can be really useful, but maybe not for like writing the whole thing. So like we use it for research or we use it to like for me specifically when I'm doing social media stuff, I will ask it if I'm doing like a social media post about a blog, I will ask it to go through the blog, pull out good pointers, and then I can make
Mhm.
social media posts on those specifically
Mhm.
or like a carousel post on that. So it's really good for that, but it's not the best at writing your whole post for you because it's formulaic, it's not human. I mean, you can kind of ask it to put in a little bit of empathy or a little bit of liveliness or kind of switch things up sometimes, but then like sometimes it can take more work using the AI than not using the AI. So um we wouldn't recommend it for an end all be all if you're writing content or copy, but I mean you can use it for market research or like for ideas even. It'll give really good
Mhm.
ideas. So yeah, but
Yeah.
use it, but make sure you go through it after, make sure that
Right.
it's human and that
Right.
it like actually appeals to your renters.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and that's the thing I've noticed too, because we've used it quite a bit to experiment with it, just to see, you know, in ways in which it could kind of speed up different processes. So like you said, asking it to quickly scan this content and then tell you the like biggest points or whatever, so you can use them. That saves you some time. You don't have to read the whole thing. It gave you those big points. Um, and I think that there are a lot of ways like that where we found if you can ask it the right questions, if you can give it the right information, it can say, hey, here's a way you could improve this, or here are some other things you should cover. Here are some things that people who write similar blogs might have covered.
Yeah.
So you can use it for research, like you said, or to get specifically more information or some recommendations. You can have it evaluate some text. When it comes to writing, I completely agree about it being really formulaic, especially with things like, you know, you could have it write posts for you, but it's going to follow a very specific formula and they're all going to sound the same.
Yeah.
So it won't necessarily be a bad post. If you read it, you'd be like, oh, this is like a lot of other ones I've seen, but it's going to be very much just like that. So it's not always going to be authentic to your brand or your voice, which is important because you have a unique audience you're trying to reach, which means that your voice should be geared towards that. And
For
so,
sure.
it's tricky too, because if you just jump into something like ChatGPT and you ask it to write something or ask it to do, it has a very specific tone. It has a specific like set of like word choices
Yes.
it makes
Yep.
all the time. So, you start to notice certain patterns. So just because that is really big and a lot of people want to use it as a shortcut, do use it as a shortcut, but don't just have it write everything for you, like Danny said. I feel like it's just not going to be as effective. You're always going to need to check it anyway because it's not always accurate. So just make sure that when you do look at it, if you're using it at all, that you're either using it for research and writing something completely yourself, or you use it just for basic structure and that you really put it in your own voice. It's just, that would be my recommendation. I don't think AI is like evil, but it's definitely not as good as even if you're not a writer, you know how to talk to people, you know how to communicate. And the best thing you can do to have good content and copy is to follow natural communication and conversation patterns. Make it easy to understand.
Yes.
Like it's way more important that it is clear than that it is anything else. You know, I've heard people talk about, oh, well, you want it to be short and sweet. Or you want it to be, but yes, if you can, but it's way more important that it's clear. In studying things like UX, they talk about that a lot. Like if you're trying to have a good user experience or you want them to like make the right choice on a form or something, you want them to take a very specific step, it actually sometimes is better to have even more content on there, like make it longer, but because it clarifies something. And AI is just not always great about being clear or reaching those goals. So you've got to make sure that it's set in a way that's easy to read. You know, you want everything to be readable, so that whoever reads it gets it. So I don't know. I feel like I just talked a lot about that, but that's a big thing that I've noticed. Like AI
Yeah.
doesn't know how to do that. I feel like,
Yeah, well, for sure. Well, and we could do a whole other video just on AI. I mean,
yeah,
people make courses on it now. Like I've
right,
actually
yeah,
taken courses just to see how to talk to it to
right,
get the
right,
result I want. But
right.
it's like, so you can ask it to change tone. You can ask it to use different words. You can ask it, but it's also like, at what point does that become more work than just writing it yourself? But like you said too, you want it to be human. You're talking to humans, and this is like, it's a machine, and it will pull from a whole bunch of different sources. And so, like you said, you're not always sure if that information is accurate. So
Mhm.
you want to make sure, like, even if you're using it, you make sure that the stuff that it gives you is accurate. And you want to make sure that like it sounds human and that you're actually talking to your renters.
Exactly. Yep. Keep your audience in mind. How do you talk to them in person?
Yeah,
If you're
yeah,
a property manager, you talk to them all the time. So think about that. If you're doing the writing yourself, that's just a big thing to keep in mind. How would you say this to someone if they came into the office? What would you say to get them to take a tour? A lot of those things are going to be exactly the kind of things you'd want to write too. Think about what your renters' priorities are. Highlight those things in your captions and your posts on your website. Um, I mean, we can't cover every single thing in this video, but I just think if you can keep that in mind, that your audience are these prospective renters, you know kind of who they are. Always write to them. And then write in a way like that's the way you would talk to them.
yeah.
And that's already gonna put you kind of ahead of the game in
Oh,
a
for
sense.
sure.
People really respond to that. So it's a good starting point, and then if you want to go further because you really want to dive into more content and copy stuff, we're going to have some videos about that coming out, but also you can do your own research or you can hire somebody to do it for you. I mean, that's what we do. We write up all the time, so you have a lot of options in that way, but we did want to make sure you understood a little bit about what they are even, so you know what to ask for and what you need.
For sure. Yes, thank you. I wanted to make one quick point here because you mentioned talking like a human and how you would actually talk to them if they came into the office. Authenticity is huge right now. Like there's so many people, so many digital marketers are talking about authenticity and how that's going to be, since there is all of these tools that can do stuff for you. It's like, okay, but are you showing up? People want to connect with an actual person.
Mhm.
So showing them that you're authentic is huge right now. And so I just wanted to
Mhm.
make that point as well,
Yeah,
especially if you're writing content and copy.
yeah.
You want it
Well,
to
and that's
sound like,
exactly, and that's Google's doing that too. So like you think you're just doing it for people, but Google is picking up on those things because Google wants it to be human. It's like, well, humans are looking for this. So
yep,
what's their search intent? What are they actually looking for? And so it prioritizes content. So your blog posts, if you're writing them, your web pages, when you write them, like it prioritizes stuff that seems authentic and has authority. And
yep,
so, um, every algorithms just as much as people are looking for that now. So you do want to make sure that that's high priority when it comes to writing whatever content you're writing.
For sure. Okay, so we're actually going to do 2 more videos on copy and content, one specifically for copy and specifically for content. And so if you want to see those, make sure to like and subscribe and make sure to hit the bell so that you're notified when those become available. And yeah, or if you just like marketing vids or like apartment marketing videos in general. So yeah, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks.